Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get back a talk to MTSU. I still think about the art history courses I've taken, like to this day. So very exciting. Hopefully this presentation will be just as exciting. So what's with that art history degree, right? So back in 2010, I was an undergrad. I was ending my sophomore year, and I originally came in as a dental hygiene major. Taking those science classes, I quickly learned that that was not going to work out for me. So I went home and I thought like, okay, well, what are things that I'm actually interested in? And I typed in history, I typed in art, and then I was like, oh, you can actually get an art history degree, right? And then from there, I started looking at what you could do with an art history degree. And it's work in a museum, you can be a curator, you can be a university professor, all these different things. I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, I love it. And I didn't again, like, I didn't realize that you can study art history because my high school, like, we didn't offer it, right? So hopefully you'll get to see another aspect that's neither of those things, right? It's not working in university. Anyways, so at the same time, I should say this, because you'll see it in the presentation. So at the same time that I changed my major to art history, I joined the military. And I did it because I needed to pay for school, right? As most people do. I actually come from Clarksville. So my dad was active duty for 20 years. I had a lot of friends that I grew up with who joined ROTC to help pay for school also. So I did those things at the same time. And it kind of led me on to this career path where these two things kept coming, they kept colliding with each other. So go ahead and get started. All right. So we have these two famous pieces of art, right? So I know you guys are talking about the Renaissance period right now. So we have on the left Michelangelo's Madonna and Child, right? It's at Bruges, so it's also like the Madonna at Bruges. And then you also have Leonardo da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine, right? Very famous works of art. May or may not know it, but if you do know it and you're seeing it, right, because these things exist, part of the reason why they are accessible to the public now and, you know, look pretty well is because we have what's called like the monuments, men and women from World War II. So during World War II, the Nazis they took a lot of works of art from museums, from families, right? Mostly, obviously, like predominantly Jewish families. So the World War II monuments, men and women, were responsible for tracking down these pieces of art and recovering them. Right. So in the end, there were over 345 men and women from 14 different nations. And that's, a couple things that often get missed out is that there are always women that were part of this effort, right? And not only in the United States, but from other countries. So it wasn't just the United States that was doing it. And then you have the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives section, so MFAA, which is the original name for the Monuments Men and Women group. Right. And this organization was filled with museum directors, curators, art historians, artists, architects, librarians, all these, intellectuals, highly educated people who wanted to join this effort to make sure that the recovery happens. The last monument man, right, left Europe in 1951, and in the end, over 5 million objects were recovered. This is still a recovery effort that's still going on to this day. There's lots of organizations that are working on bringing these pieces back, but that's a lot, right? And I love these photos because you have like the real life the heroes who are recovering the pieces. So we saw the photos of both of these. So we have Michelangelo's, we have the sculpture right here, 1945 being hoisted. And then you have on the right, you have Leonardo's painting that was recovered. And then this is a photo. Please excuse my hand, my poor finger. I clearly smashed it in something. But this is me holding the original photo of the sculpture being recovered. So part of it, we went to the National Archives, and they hold a lot of these original documents, photographs. It's amazing. So, but anyways, but that's the photo. Um, just a couple other photos that are just to kind of show you what they've done. So we have the Neuschwanstein Castle, and you see the work of art, like an object being escorted out. So they had to get really, technical, really strategic about how they were going to be able to recover so many things, right? Because you have like really heavy pieces, you have delicate pieces. So this is also known as the Disney Castle. That some of the works of art were located in. And then on the right, you have Rose Valland. So if you've seen the Monuments Men movie, the one with George Clooney, so there was Kate Blanchett who was in there, and then this is the actual woman she was playing. So Rose Valland is French. She pretty much had like like an espionage type role, right? Working undercover, taking notes of all the places that the artworks were being moved to. And because of her efforts, so much has been recovered like after that period. Okay, so fast forward, right? So that's World War II. And then in 2014, this movie came out, The Monuments Men. May or may not have seen it. So at the same time in 2014, because I graduated MTSU at 2012, 2014, I was starting my first year as a master's student at Florida State. So 2 years, I had a little break. This movie came out. And then the first semester of the master's program in my Museum and Cultural Heritage Studies class, we were talking about destruction of works of art, and we mentioned the ziggurat, if you don't know, but during the Iraqi invasion, you had some U.S. soldiers who were on the ziggurat that left some damage, and we were just talking about the effects of that. During that class, I came across this article. It was an article about U.S. troops who were sent to Iraq to do some recovery, right? And I was like, oh, this is nothing I've ever heard about before, right? So really interesting. And one of the people that stuck out to me was Major Corey Wegner. So she was a museum director at the time. She was in the Army Reserves. She deployed. She was responsible for helping with recovering some of the objects that were looted from the Baghdad Museum, right? So it's their national museum. She was also responsible for covering a lot of Jewish artifacts. So, to see that, right? To be one in the military, have an art history degree, and see someone that that's doing that, and I was like, this is incredible. Like, what is this, right? And that was it, right? So I thought it was interesting. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then continued with my master's, right? And then obviously I was still in the Army, actually in the National Guard at that time, right? So saw this, fascinating, and then life went on. And then fast forward a little bit. So in my Army life, right? Because everything is going to start going back and forth. In my Army life, I should say, when I first selected my art history major, nobody really understood what it was. Nobody understood why I would do it. You had the military that, you're like, oh, this hippie girl, right, that's the reality. Like, you don't, if you don't know what art history is, you don't know what it is. So people really didn't understand it. But for me, I'm like, it just makes sense that if you're dealing with people, you study art history so you can really understand the culture and how, like, the past does affect the future. It affects the present. So if you don't study that, if we're going to places and you don't know the culture, you don't know how to interact with people, I think it could be problematic, right? So for me, it always made sense. So graduated with my master's in 2016, right? Um, After my master's, I wanted to do a PhD, but I wanted to take a little bit of break. I'm still continuing with my military degree or my military career. I end up changing my job to public affairs, and I had to go to like a public affairs school for the Army. And in that course, one of the activities is to interview a person, right? Interview a person, write an article. And they said you can interview whoever you want, right? It can be a military person, a non-military person. They're like, shoot for the stars, shoot for a celebrity. You can maybe try Oprah, whoever. And then in my head, I was like, okay, well, who would I really want to talk about? And I thought of Corey Wagner, right? So, who was the major that went to Iraq to do some recovery. So I looked her up, right? Because this is in it's probably 2017 maybe. So I looked her up and I saw that she was at the Smithsonian. So she later became the director of the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, also known as SCRY. They are known for sending a response to disasters around the world. So they've been to like Nepal after the earthquake, they've been to Haiti, and helping like, preserve cultural heritage and training specialists out there. So I looked her up and I was like, wow, I have to talk to her. So I cold called her, or I think I found her email. I emailed her and I was like, hey, you don't know me, but um, I'm interested in what you did. I'm an art history major, or I'm trying to go back for my PhD in art history. I read about you during my master's degree. The fact that like you were able to do something with this is fascinating. Can I please interview you just for this little article, right? And again, it was just like a homework assignment, maybe like a larger homework assignment, but just a homework assignment, wasn't getting published anywhere. She agreed to it. We spoke. We had a really good conversation. She told me about how it was balancing the two, and because it is really hard. And if you don't know anything about like more academic fields, it's a lot of work. You have lots of reading to do. The expectation is that you present at conferences. Presenting those things, takes time to put and public, like put that together. Your coursework is really intense. So there's just a lot of things that goes into it. And then if you are a commissioned officer in the National Guard, it's a lot more work, right? So traditionally, the idea again, right? Like the thought is that you work 2 weekends or 2 days a month, which is when you're only working on the weekends, but that's not true, right? If you're in a leadership position, realistically, you're working throughout the week. A lot of work, and to balance the two was really difficult. And a lot of people on both sides didn't understand the requirements for the military, didn't understand the requirements for art history. And I asked her, I was like, well, like, how did you do the two? And she's like, well, it was really difficult. And she shared that she was putting on a large exhibit and she wasn't able to be there for the opening because she ended up getting deployed, right? So for me, I was like, okay, well, after my contract is done with the military, I'm going to get out and focus just on the PhD because, right, like it's somebody that's an expert who is telling me it's really hard. So that's what my plan was, right? So that was probably 2016, 2017. Fast forward, to 2018. 2018, I start my PhD at Florida State University. Um, and finally, my contract with the military was up. I was really excited. I end up turning in all of my gear. So, like, legit, I was getting out and I was like, okay, it's gonna be like the one time I can finally like focus on art history. So actually, I'll tell this real quick. So I remember Dr. Cochran, she told me like there was a summer trip to Turkey, right, that she was taking a class, and I remember I was like, oh, I want to go so bad, it's Turkey, the art, right, and I couldn't go because that summer I had an RTC obligation. And I remember it was like, to this day, like it's like one of the biggest regrets that I didn't find a way to make it work. But years later I was able to go to Turkey. And actually I've been to Turkey, I think two times, after like two or three times now. But that's like something else, like, okay, I can finally focus on like my passion, right? So again, 2019, turned in my gear, working on my PhD. I come into the office, and it's a student office, and one of my cohorts, she was like, hey, did you see that article this morning about like the monuments men? And I was like, no, I didn't. She sent it to me. This is the article that she sends me from ArtNet. And I'm like, oh, it's the program. It sounds like the program that I read about many years ago to my master's degree. Read the article, I see Corey Wagner's name again. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know this person. I've talked to her before, like a few years ago, right? Because it's been years at this point. End up emailing her, telling her congratulations. Because she was part of the initiative to get the U.S. Army to talk and work with Scry. Tell her congratulations. And then I told her, I was like, I'm starting my PhD. I'm listening to what you told me. I'm getting out of the military. I'm going to finally focus on art history. Like, this is it. And then she responds with, hey, it's good to hear from you. I understand I kind of told you like it's hard to balance the two. And, it'd be easier if you choose one or the other. But would you mind like actually sticking around a little bit, join the Army Reserve, and be part of this program? And of course, I couldn't say no, right? So here we are today. Long story, but just to show you, just to be open, making sure you're talking to people, networking, because you just never know where you're going to end up, right? So here we are, end up signing with the U.S. Army Reserve. I'm still in. And this is what we've done. So since then, the first Army Monuments Officer training was held at the Smithsonian in 2022. Yeah, 2022 now. And similar to what the monuments officers were in the past in World War II, it was not just the United States that was participating in it. So if you look at the photo on the left, we have a soldier from the United Kingdom, right? So you can see his belt is a little green. So he's from the United Kingdom. We had the Carabinieri from Italy, like a high level police force. We had soldiers from Austria, Lebanon, the Netherlands, right? So from multiple places. So it's kind of like, the same effort being, again, right? Because you can't work in isolation. It's just better when multiple countries come together and do this work together. So here's just some of the trainings that we were taught by Scry. And this is the types of practices that they do when they go to another country when they have like natural disasters. So on the left, it's recovering a textile, like practicing recovering a textile that was damaged from being wet. In the center, it's documents that were wet. How do you dry it out to make sure that you like protect that material? All right. So just think about like birth certificates. Maybe there's like a rare gem, like your great grandfather like wrote a letter to, his wife, right? If you want to save that. And then on the right, which probably really interesting that people don't take in consideration is you can see it's like a crime scene, right? See people in their little cute blue booties, you have gloves being worn, and then you have like the numbers and things on the floor. So here, part of the training, we are also taught by the FBI art crime team, right? So if you don't know, the FBI has an art crime team, and they do really cool things. So we are taught how to label things from a crime scene perspective, right? Because if you think about it, if we go somewhere, right? Because we with this newer effort, it's not just natural disasters, it's similar things with in Iraq, right? If there's looting that happens, if there's intentional explosions that happen, right? You want to document it as a crime scene. And the reason why you want to document it as a crime scene is because if there's intentional damage of cultural heritage, property, then that's a war crime, right? Hands down, war crime. If you document it, it's easier to prosecute later on, right? It might not be in the next year, next 2 years, but hopefully you can get it prosecuted in the end, right? So we're taught by the FBI, and it's, you can see it's an actual like law enforcement style training. So really cool. We did that. Also part of the training is, kind of a scenario, right? You have 24 hours to make sure that you clear this museum. How are you going to do it when you have all these things going on? So the woman in the white hat, that's Corey Wagner. You can see people like civilians, soldiers, and then the gentleman in the black uniform in the center, he's from the Carabinieri from Italy. Right, so just really, really cool training. And then in 2023, we also had another monuments training. And this one was, it involved soldiers from Ukraine, right? So a lot of them were part of this effort because, again, talking about the intentional destruction of the intentional damage of cultural property is a war crime, right? So learning how to distinguish those things, seeing how to properly document that. And, I'm an art historian, but the effort that's in the military, we're not like, there's not that many art historians. There's archaeologists, there's people that deals with like anthropology, so many different backgrounds. And again, like it's always great to have a collaborative effort because everybody's trained a different way and we see things very differently and take things in consideration, right? So in the center with the white shirt, we had Ihor Pashivalo. So he is from Ukraine, and kind of again, like this full circle that just keeps happening, like it just keeps happening in the world, right? So in 2022, when we had the monuments training, he was one of the guest speakers, and he was still in Ukraine. He was in Ukraine when he gave the presentation, and during his presentation, right, because it's actively at war, he had a bulletproof vest, right? So, and the fact that, he sat there in his vest, giving this talk, talking about, the importance of trying to do this protection, making sure that people are aware of how it affects people nowadays, right? Like, again, blowing up a church like 200 years, that, that was made 200 years ago, or even older than that, it affects the people today because a lot of people still tie their identity to those things, right? So it's as if, I'm not going to even give an example of the United States just because like the culture is so different, very different, right? We're like a newer country, but just to show you, like, it's not just, oh, it's just art. It's not just art. A lot of people around the world see it as like kind of like it's like an extension to their arm. And there's been many cases, not just in Ukraine, but around the world where you have people that put their life literally on the line to protect something that they found that was valuable to them, right? So it was it was very great to see the next year Eeyore in person being part of the training, and telling us how they went around and took techniques to preserve their own cultural heritage. So one of the examples, you may have seen the picture, in a city square, there's a large monument, and you can't move a monument inside or take it down. In city center. So what they've done was they put sandbags around it. So if there was a blast, it would hopefully, protect the monument from collapsing or having extreme damage. And then there's this photo. So in last year, if you haven't gone, you really should. So the World War II Museum in New Orleans has like this new setup, and they replicate the salt mines that the monuments men and women went to recover a lot of art. So they have the whole setup. It's really fascinating. I have more pictures, but I was like, let me not bog down this presentation with that. But in the photo, let me see if I can get my laser. Okay. So here we have Corey Wegner, right? So you've heard about her a lot. Here, this is Robert Etzel. So Robert Etzel is the person who wrote the Monuments Men book and was then the person who helped get that book turned into a movie, right? And then he's responsible for the Monuments Men and Women Foundation. Next to him is Colonel Scott DeJesse, who was pretty much like spearheading the program in the Army, right? And this is all of us at one of the openings. And this event was really nice because they brought in family members from like that were, descendants of the monuments men and women here. So that it was really nice to see, because if you go to the museum and you see the exhibit, they talk about different people at, their contributions, and to see someone's like son, their grandchild saying like, that's grandpa, like, it was such an emotional thing. And it's just kind of just remind you that these are real people, right? And there were lives lost for this recovery effort. Okay, and then again, fast forward, right? So fast forward to last year, there was an effort that I was part of. Am I good on time? Sorry, I'm usually better at this.
No. Yeah, so we're at 4:42. So we've been talking
Perfect.
30 minutes. So yeah, great.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so then there's this effort that I was part of, which was uh, taking 22 artifacts that were looted from World War II, right? So we have the Battle of Okinawa, that was returned to Okinawa Prefecture, right? So I should say like that title. It should say return to Okinawa Prefecture, not return to Japan. If you do your history, you can understand why the distinction is should be a distinction. But anyway, so the 22 objects were taken. They were recovered. So the story goes, the family that actually recovered it, they were cleaning out their one of their family members who passed, their attic or something, and they came across these Asian works of art, and they're like, I don't think we should have these. These look really important. They look real. So they actually called the FBI, and that so which is how it became like an FBI investigation. And gotta say kudos to that family, because if that family never reached out to the FBI, like this would still be lost. Right. So if if you go through your family members' things, and you're like, I don't think we should have this, try to give it back. That'd be really nice for the world. Anyway, so part of this effort, and you can see, it was talked about. So you have Jeffrey Kelly, who is now retired, but he was the FBI agent that was involved in this. And of course, he was part of the FBI art crime team. to help bring this back. So this effort was very much an interagency effort. So we had the FER art crime team that was given the case. And then in order to take the object and give it back to Okinawa, the most cost effective thing was to use the U.S. military, right? So we have this picture. So you have the pilots, the U.S. Air Force pilots that were that flew it back. You had myself and Colonel Scott DeJesse, which you've seen the photo of. We were the custodian. So Agent Kelly, he signed it over to us, and Colonel DeJesse and I, we were the only monument man and woman that that had the objects from DC all the way to Okinawa, right? So we were responsible for it. Through this effort, we also were also involved was NCIS. There was the Smithsonian Institute, so they did a lot of the conservation, looking at everything, working with the FBI. There's the State Department, and then you have the Okinawan officials that it ended up going back to. And this is us on the aircraft with the objects, right? The 22 objects. And it's the first time that the objects were returned, looted objects were returned since 1948. Right? So, highlight of my career, obviously. To do something such like a feel good thing for works of art that, deserve to be given back to the people. And the words are critical, right? It's not very important things. So this is one of the things that were recovered. It's a hand-drawn map of Okinawa that dates back to the 19th century, right? Very beautiful. And then there's also, so this is like one of the portraits. There was actually like two portraits, and they were chopped up a little bit. So the Okinawan, the royalty portraits are really significant because they're said to be like the last depiction of the kings, right? So there's a photo of these portraits, like there's a black and white, you can do like research on that, where they're like, it's people from Okinawa asking like, hey, have you seen this? But to be able to bring back that history back to Okinawa, I think it's very important. Right. So that's, one of the things that I was able to do. And then kind of like going back to like the art history thing, right? Because I'm still doing art history. It's such a weird, wild world. So just to show you a little bit about like what you can do with art history right outside of the military. So here I had a fellowship to study in London for 1 month. So this was last year. This is at the British Museum. And this is an electrotype. It's a copy of a very famous coin. So I studied the late Roman Empire. And this is Constantine the Great, Constantine the First. And this medallion is pretty much like the object that got me to really delve into what my dissertation topic, which is the Cairo. Not enough time to talk about it, but to be able to see the object that I've been studying for years, right, since like 2018, and to finally be able to see it in person in 2024, yeah, just remarkable feeling. And it was done because I was doing study on some coins in that collection, and then one of the curators said like, hey, there's this Roman curator who's here, Richard Abdi. So he was like, hey, do you want to see this thing? And I was like, oh, of course I want to see this thing. So, he brought it out. Really cool. Another cool thing you can do with, if you do graduate studies with art history or museum and cultural heritage, is you get like these backdoor behind the scene access, right? So while I was in London, I traveled to the Ashmolean, and then this is the cute little side door, right, that they said to go through, which is like where the staff goes through to get into the museum, right? Because instead of dealing with all the the security and all that fuss, you get an easy access in the center of the British Museum, right? I was able to go past the ropes, right, like VIP access. And then on the right is a museum in it's outside of Vienna. It's the Carnuntum. So it deals with my dissertation. Again, it's in Roman. It was a Roman fort, and I was able to go to this museum while it was on the off season. So the museum was actually closed, and the way that I was able to go was because one of the soldiers that I worked with from the original, like from the first monuments, men and women training, she was a Roman scholar. She invited me to Vienna for a military ball. And, I asked, I'm like, hey, I'm really trying to do some dissertation research while I'm out there. And she's like, oh, I know people here. You should reach out and see if they'll help you get your research done. So yeah, like the museum was closed. The kind woman picked me up from the train station, drove me to the museum. The only one in the museum, very cool. And of course, looking at another coin. I promise to look at more things than coins, but it just for my dissertation is taking me nowadays, right? But again, like very cool things that can happen. And just going back to that full circle, right? The military and art history is just the circle that just never ends. Connections, connections. And hopefully some of that makes sense. And that's it, right? Like just to show you, just never know. And I'm still, right, still dealing with all of them all at the same time. It never ends, but that's all I have.